They were singing songs, they were praising God from inside of this starvation bunker, and I immediately realized like some sort of miracle of hope happened inside of that cell. He was God's face to these men, and it felt like he was becoming God's face to me.
How did you imagine and then write and direct the experience of starving to death?
I was experiencing extreme sleep deprivation for years, both the torture of the sleep deprivation itself, and then also the torture of not knowing if it would ever end. I really felt Kolbe saying, I have picked you to do this movie. I've never made a movie before. If you're going to ask me to do it, then you have to heal me.
What does singing sound like when you're starving to death in a bunker after giving up your life for a stranger? Today, I sit down with Anthony D'Ambrosio, a young director who shares about his debut film, Triumph of the Heart. Anthony shares about his own years of debilitating and unexplained sickness, including years of almost no sleep. During this time, Anthony had profound spiritual experiences of St Maximilian Kolbe and felt called by God to make a film about his life. Both this saint and this movie is one that our culture needs to make sense of suffering and to experience the transformative power of Jesus' love. This is the real story of St Maximilian Kolbe. Go to triumphoftheheart.com today to get your tickets and support this incredible film. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you to all of you who have been subscribing. The channel continues to grow because of all of you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Anthony D'Ambrosio, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so grateful to be here.
I'm glad to have another Italian on the show.
I know, paisan.
I love it. And you're Southern Italian, I think you were saying.
Southern Italian from Naples.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gritty, crazy, and creative.
Gritty, yeah, very creative, just a little bit off the wall. When I was there first time visiting my family, I asked my great aunt Renata, who's like, probably
Renata.
like 100 years old. And she's, just completed her second autobiography. So it's just kind of amazing. But I was like, are there police here? And she was like, it's like, this is my kind of city.
That is awesome.
Yeah. But
that is so
a
beautiful.
lover of beauty, a lover of culture. So I'm grateful to be doing what I'm doing now. I feel like it's a sort of a modern maturation of that, I guess, Italian Florentine kind of Renaissance approach to life. So
yes, huge congratulations on your film that's out, Triumph of the Heart. It was incredible. It was gorgeous. I'm always crying in these interviews. Sorry, guys, but when there's beauty, you brings tears to your eyes. But I was deeply moved and surprised. I knew it was going to be quality because everyone, it's a quality film, Lila, because new entrepreneurs and their films, sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. But I knew it was going to be quality, but I was stunned by the quality of your film. And it was moved. And a huge congratulations, because that is an incredible labor of love.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the trailer.
Come on.
What are we here to do? To kill? No. We are here to break the will of Poland so the Reich may reset the bone. You know the rules. I will choose 10 of you to starve until the missing prisoner is found or until death. This is fun.
I got children now!
I can take his place.
I'm Brother Paul!
Don't leave me. Don't leave me.
Where have you been these past 2 years? To believe in heaven or God? Certainly you couldn't have been living in this world.
That's right. We have our voices. We must hold on to our hope. Don't give up. Finish the race. This is not possible. Tell me, how are they still alive? I believe that somehow, on the other side of this savage life, everyone who has gone before us is watching, beholding this moment. Love is the realest thing. No one can take that from us, even now.
We'll triumph in our sorrows and rise.
To treat a torture scene in the Holocaust but to make something beautiful out of it that's watchable and yet real is really tough to do. And you did it.
Yeah. I had a lot of people who were like, Anthony, please don't do this for your first film. You can't do this and not do it perfectly. You can do like, if you want to do some sort of faith-based thing, like orphans winning a sports tournament, like that's what you should try for your first, a little more forgiving than an Auschwitz movie. But
a torture cell Auschwitz movie.
Like 12 Angry Men style in one sort of constrained place. It's a very difficult, I guess, way to thread a needle, but I think that somehow we were given the grace to sort of pull it off, and it came together, a miracle of miracles, and much better than we deserve to have made. But I think that's God definitely supplied the grace where that met human weakness.
So I'm excited to get into the film, and we're going to watch a few scenes from this film, if that's okay. I don't know if
I would love that.
I don't know if we talked about that in advance, but I wanted to do that with you. But I wanted to, there's a lot of backstory here about why you made this film, because you were an entrepreneur, you had a marketing agency, or you have, I should say, and then you get into film, and it was very much a calling. You felt called to do this. So I want to hear that story. And also, I love that you were talking about Naples being Italian. I do feel like God has a special gifting that he gives certain people, and Italians clearly historically have been given that, and you're living that today, which I love.
Yeah, I do love that. I love, I think that being an artist is always this sort of risky thing, not the responsible direction to take in life. But for those of us who care about culture and who care about restoring Western values, Christian values to culture, it's one of those, I guess, roles that we as Catholics, as Christians, have not sort of taken. We haven't sort of gone on the crusade to regain that pride of place that we once had, I think, as the leaders in art and culture. And so I am super grateful to just be a part of, I think, a new renaissance that is taking place as we speak, of amazing art that's being created to, I guess, bring the glory of God to the culture.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I think about obviously the great art of, that originated in Italy. I think about the Sistine Chapel, of course, and we have beautiful churches throughout all of Italy, especially in Rome, and everywhere you go, there's the works of the masters. And this was art that was oriented towards glorying God, bringing God glory. And even in Naples, there's that. Have you been to that hidden kind of museum that the princes of Naples, they paid for, that where there's the...
I have not heard of this.
Okay, this is crazy. So the only reason I know about this is my husband lived in Naples for 2 years with the Navy. So he's very Italianophile guy. Thankfully for me, I'm Italian. But there's this beautiful little museum, and it has the Jesus Christ, this incredibly lifelike sculpture of Jesus with the wrapped in his shroud. The Veiled Christ. This is the image right here. The Veiled Christ, 1753 marble sculpture by Giuseppe San Martino, located in the San Severo Chapel in Naples, Italy. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. This is it right here. But it's just
yes.
You've probably seen this image.
I mean, seen this image. Yeah,
when you're in Naples,
unbelievable.
But no one really knows about this because people don't usually go to Naples for the art. Right. And this is there. But what's so compelling is this was basically the wealth and the power of the day. The princes of Naples would commission the great artists,
right? And
it would be religious art.
Yeah.
And you are following in the footsteps by creating today's religious art form, feature film.
Yeah.
And doing it to bring incredible glory to God. And it takes a tremendous amount of investment to do that.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I find to be almost just so fascinating about this project, is that generally speaking, when you want to make a film, it's like making a cathedral. The investment is actually kind of similar. If you think about perhaps what Cabrini cost to make, that was like a $40 million project. And we did ours for $500,000.
Are you kidding?
No.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That film was $500,000?
$500,000 to make it. And that's because everybody that was sort of rallying around it was doing it on mission. There was no billionaire behind it. There was no sort of Medici, but there was this ecosystem of young magnanimous, many people that you know in Dallas who are sort of, who will be the Medicis of the next sort of century, I guess, but who right now are just sort of able to put $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 behind something that is unique and interesting. And when they came across my project, there's a whole kind of cohort of people in Catholic investors, businessmen in one city in Dallas, Texas, that really got behind it and made sure that this thing happened. But really, it's been a crowdfunded, crowdsourced project from the heart of the church. The people who made it are all like young youth missionaries who were like doing young adult ministry and youth ministry before, and figured out how to put on events and figured out how to do things on a budget. And we all went to Poland to make this thing together. But it's not been done in the typical way that I think films have been made. And part of what allowed it to be, I think, well done is the fact that it was completely outside of any of these normal systems by which films are both created but also sort of squashed, in that there was no sort of studio or no single voice that could rub out the Catholicism from it, or rub out the I guess the unique characteristics that really made it authentic to the story that we're trying to tell.
Tell me about your background and when you were first inspired by Maximilian Kolbe. St Maximilian Kolbe.
Yeah. So I grew up Catholic. I'm one of those, Catholic homeschooled kids that ran around with massive glasses and just sort of a brain on a stick, like I read all the time and didn't really, I was just very socially awkward and all that. My dad is a theologian, and I eventually went to seminary and launched out actually right around the time that I was going into youth ministry was when a lot of your kind of videos were coming out, and I was deeply, deeply inspired. I wanted to be in the pro-life movement and start really like making an impact politically. And when I started doing youth ministry, I realized that we had a couple of these events where we did live sonograms for the kids, and I had about 400 youth, high school youth that were there watching these live sonograms. And I just realized that no matter what I told them, I needed to show them what truth was. They had to sort of experience it in a tangible way. And I knew from that moment that the impact that I wanted to make was to show people in some way, like help them experience the truth, rather than going directly at the problem or whatever through more of that like apologetic or intellectual discourse. But during that time, as I was sort of preparing for, how am I going to get into media, I became very, very ill with a chronic illness that nobody knew how to diagnose. One of these things that just sort of was a mystery to everybody. And one of the hallmarks of it, or the more difficult symptoms, was the complete inability to sleep. After many, many years, it took about a decade to diagnose, but it was a chronic fungal infection. And the way that the toxins that it was creating, they sort of shut off all of the hormonal processes that allow for sleep to happen. And so I was experiencing like extreme sleep deprivation for years. And in the midst of that, I was about to get engaged, and was sort of about to go on the speaker circuit, and had all of these things in front of me that were like, my life was about to really get started, if that makes sense. And then it all kind of fell apart all at this moment. And in the midst of that, and in the midst of the suffering there, I really lost my faith. I lost even a desire to live in the sort of ongoing kind of torture. And I came across the one thing that I could do was I could write. And so I was doing some freelance writing for some different entrepreneurs in the area that were kind of throwing me a bone. One of them was Catholic, and he had dedicated his practice to St. Maximilian Kolbe. And I was writing a biography, a small little biography on the about page for this website. And I found on the Wikipedia page of all places, as I was doing research for Maximilian Kolbe, I had known that this is a saint who gave his life in Auschwitz. Of course, Polish priest, brought into Auschwitz, stood up in a lineup and decided to volunteer to take a man's place in a starvation bunker. But that's about as much as I had known. But what I found out was that he lived for 14 days without food or water after that, and that there were other men inside of that cell who lived all the way to the point where they were executed together because they were singing songs, they were praising God from inside of this starvation bunker. And I immediately realized like some sort of miracle of hope happened inside of that cell. I think particularly because of my vantage point from being somebody who was in that moment in despair, who had lost my faith, who couldn't see how God could be a good God if he allowed this kind of thing to happen. I couldn't imagine what those men would have had to be given in terms of grace to stay alive for 14 days and to sing songs and to praise God in the midst of that starvation bunker. And I just began to be haunted by the story and found myself every time I woke up in the middle of the night in terror, like going in my meditation to being inside of this starvation bunker and asking Kolbe this simple question, which is, why live in all of this? Why continue to live? Why continue to have faith in God and have hope if our lives are now sort of shut out from the world and no one can see? And it seems to be that there's no point, that there's no meaning in this suffering. And it felt to me that his answers were clearly made by his very presence, that he was God's face to these men. And it felt like he was becoming like God's face to me in the midst of my own sort of dark night of the soul. And over time, as I meditated on this, I began to heal, and I began to find, even though my illness was not being healed, that my heart and my soul and my spirit was by love. And the writing, the process of developing the script, and sort of the calling to make the movie all was sort of nursed in this, I guess, in this sort of dark night where God was healing me, and I realized that this story could be healing for others as well if I was sort of loyal to it and gave myself to it.
So when you're describing this period of time, you mentioned chronic sleep deprivation and used the word torture.
Mm-hmm.
What did that look like? You're only able to sleep a few hours at a time. You're always exhausted. What was that looking and feeling like for you at the time?
Yeah, so it was about 20 minutes to 2 hours a night that I could get.
Of sleep. Total.
Yeah. And I would wake up out of that, however much it was, from like the worst nightmares you could possibly imagine, into a panic attack. And I'm not sure exactly like why that was the case, but it was like a timer. It just happened every single night. And until I was able to get medication many, many years later, that just was every day. And every night. So it was very debilitating and very lonely, because in the greatest time of suffering, nobody else is awake. So there's nobody to talk to. And I have to sort of find something to do for the next sort of, 5-6 hours until daylight comes, And so that was, I think there was both the torture of the sleep deprivation itself, and then also the torture of not knowing if it would ever end. I think that part was the hardest because there were just no sort of medical answers that were coming.
And you mentioned you found out later what the issue was. So it was like a fungal infection of some kind that was preventing sleep hormones from flooding your body. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I'm no expert on any of that. But when did you end up finding that out? How many years did you go waking up every single night after just 20 minutes to 2 hours of sleep in a panic attack?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds maddening. Like,
it was maddening. I mean, that was exactly the experience. And I think that's part of why I was able to authentically tell the story. I might not have been starving for food, but having something that's like a core function of your body removed, sleep is perhaps similar enough to have an idea of what it might have been like to have food removed and not to be able to eat for 14 days the way that these men were starved with Kolbe. But I think, it was about a decade where I didn't have any sort of answers for what was happening. There were certain times when it sort of calmed down and I was able to have like a brief respite.
You also mentioned an engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds like that was broken off.
Right.
And were those things connected, if you're open to sharing?
Yeah, I was about to get engaged with the person that I had, fallen madly in love with, and that I had been pursuing for the last few years. And the experience of the illness hit just sort of at that moment where we were about to get engaged. And like you sort of mentioned, it was maddening. I could not function as a normal human being anymore. And that, at least for me, I was like, I cannot sort of hold on to this relationship and move into marriage like this. And I had hoped that would be sort of a short term, we'll kind of break up for now. And if I'm able to figure this out fast enough, before somebody else picks you up, I can get, come back to this. And it, of course, didn't work out that way. And so I had to sort of watch her move on and marry a friend of mine, and to have to let go of sort of the dreams and career that I thought that I was going to have. And to do so just without any sense of whether or not this would, be healed or to change. And so that lasted for many years, actually, until I went to Poland and finished the script. And
you were still experiencing debilitating sleep deprivation.
Yes.
Wow.
And that was in 2022. I was in Poland, and I was in Auschwitz on Kolbe's feast day. And they have all of this, all of the Poles from around there process to Auschwitz, and in front of the starvation bunker, they have a mass. And it was one of the most powerful experiences of God's sort of presence and triumph over evil that I've ever experienced. Sitting on the doorstep, really, that's where I was sitting for the vantage point, was on the doorstep of the prison block that was this torture prison block where Dr. Mengel's horrible science experiments were happening, where Kolbe was tortured, where the death wall was, and we're singing the songs that Kolbe and the men inside of the cell would have been singing, and praising God and having this mass. And as I went up to reverence the cell at the end of mass, and then to reverence a first class relic that kind of everybody processes in and does this like it's a Good Friday mass, I really felt Kolbe saying, I have picked you to do this movie and to tell my story. And I was like, I now realize the gravitas, the weight of this story. It's not just a personal story. This is a national hero, and I'm not Polish. I've never made a movie before. How could I be the one that you're picking to do this? If you're going to ask me to do it, then you have to heal me. And I came back from Poland, and I went to a pro-life health clinic, Catholic pro-life health clinic that had done a bunch of different off-the-wall tests, and they found this fungal infection a month later, gave me medication, and it just sort of evaporated, and I could sleep for the first time in years and years and years. So it was just kind of amazing, and got the first investments for the movie, and just found myself in Poland a year later shooting it. It was just sort of this amazing conveyor belt of grace, just it happened immediately. So I could tell that there was something about, I guess, this whole process that God was preparing me for, without really giving me the full vision of what was going to happen. But when God moves, he moves real hard, so it was amazing.
Anthony, what was it like to get a night of sleep for the first time in years? What was that like?
It felt like having been abandoned on a desert island and or sort of being out at sea and being rescued and coming back to land for the first time after, being alone in this sort of deserted island for years or something. That was what it felt like. I slept for 2 months straight. Like I would be in meetings and fall asleep mid-sentence. And it was like very annoying, but it was amazing. And after about 2 months of that kind of constant sleep, I was like back to human functioning, normal life.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about how forms of torture are used to keep people awake, to just psychologically destroy them. And how many years total was that season of not sleeping because of the infection?
It was about 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Our 3-year-old son loves to eat meat. And he really loves the meat that we get every month from GoodRanchers.com. GoodRanchers.com is American meat delivered. It is the highest quality beef products, chicken, pork, fish that is sourced here in the United States, mostly from small family ranchers and farms. I love these products because they are really the best on the market. They're the most delicious, tender, juicy steaks. The chicken is flavorful and moist. It's not that stringy, dry, rubbery chicken that you get from the grocery store. In fact, the Good Ranchers chicken is my favorite product there. The steaks are amazing too, but they say you go for the steak and then you leave for the chicken. If you go to goodranchers.com today and subscribe to one of their delicious monthly boxes, you will get $25 off your first order, as well as fast and free shipping. And if you use the code Lila, you'll get an additional $40 off your order. Also, if you get the monthly subscription, you will also get your choice of free bonus meat for life. So go to goodranchers.com today and don't forget to use the code Lila at checkout for an additional $40 off your first order of American meat delivered from goodranchers.com. My favorite diaper and wipes company is EveryLife. EveryLife is what we use in my household. It is truly the best product on the market. The diaper is not only constructed in a beautiful and simple way that is comfortable for your baby and of the best materials, but it also is free of harsh chemicals, and it also is leak-proof and lasts all the way through the night for your little one. We use their diapers, we use their wipes, we use their pull-ups, and now we are using their travel wipes, which I'm so excited about because we were just traveling. If you go to everylife.com today and you join their Changing Lives Club, you will get a subscription monthly to diapers and wipes of your choice. You'll get 15% off. You'll get a free box of diapers and wipes donated to a mom and baby in need. You'll get your fun tote bag. And if you use the code LILA10 at checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off your order. Enjoy EveryLife as much as I do and help change your baby while you change the world. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company on a mission to fund the pro-life movement and help moms and babies in need. What I love about this coffee is it is from the top 1 or 2% of beans in the world, and it's also mold-free, pesticide-free, ultra-low acid, and organically farmed. And this is where you and I come in. Not only can we subscribe to 7 Weeks Coffee and get the most delicious coffee delivered right to our door, we know that with every single purchase we make at 7 Weeks Coffee, they are donating a full 10% to pregnancy resource centers in need. And a huge congratulations to 7 Weeks Coffee for hitting over $1 million donated to pregnancy resource centers and moms and babies in need. Go to 7weekscoffee.com today. Subscribe and save a full 15% off your order. And when you use the code LILA, you get an additional 10% off your first order. That's a full 25% off your first order at 7weekscoffee.com, and you'll also get a free gift. Order today and help fuel the pro-life movement. I know you shared the incredible moment when you go to Poland in 2022 and you're at this mass and it's the onset for not only your healing, but the film, and feeling like St. Kolbe told you were going to do this film for me. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But was there another encounter that you had with Maximilian Kolbe before that? I think was there a dream that you had or another?
There were many
experience?
moments. I mean, I think when I first found this, I guess these details in that Wikipedia page, I would wake up, like I shared, I would wake up out of these nightmares in sort of a panic attack. But in extreme sleep deprivation, the same way that if you've ever gone on a silent retreat for 10 days or done a very rigid water fast, the veil between heaven and earth and the spiritual world and the material world becomes very blurry and very porous. You can sort of touch and feel and see through it. And at that time, I was not able to fully sleep, but I was not able to fully wake up either. And so the experiences of waking up and then meditating on the cell felt like I was sort of sitting in this dark room next to Maximilian Kolbe. And I had this, over the course of this time, I had these moments where I would, in the movie, there's all of these different characters that have all of these different perspectives on God. And one is all about like justice, and one is all about sort of this atheistic kind of angry despair. And all of those voices were my voices. All of these scenes were like moments that I had experiences or sort of visions of being inside of the cell and having dialogues with Maximilian Kolbe there. So there was not one particular moment of this breakthrough. It was this over time experiencing Kolbe's presence in the midst of my darkness and realizing that God's answer to suffering is not to take it away. It's to enter into it with you, to send his presence and his love to show you how to shoulder your cross and to move through it, to find redemption and healing and grace even in the midst of it. And that's what Kolbe was doing for the other men in that cell and also for me. And so that was, I think, the thing that really woke my heart back up.
So was it almost a daily occurrence during this time that you're thinking about Maximilian Kolbe? How often was he in your heart or mind, or kind of in these like half waking, half sleeping moments of pure exhaustion?
Eventually it was every day, because I began to use the writing of the scripts to survive the night. Like that became the way that I channeled all of that into something that was, I guess, a prayer. And the way that I survived ultimately.
When you were in Poland at this healing mass, had you come there to scout locations for the film?
It was not even that close to being a reality to me. I think that I couldn't really believe in that. I knew that I was writing something that was pretty powerful at that point, but I didn't have the faith to believe that I could really make a movie and do it justice. But I went there with just a sense that if I was going to fully tell the story of Kolbe in this script, at the very least, I needed to be among the people who knew him. And one of the things that I think is difficult about telling the story of a saint is that most of the documentation that you get about that person historically is sort of filtered through the canonization process when everybody is trying to put their best foot forward, their hometown hero. They want them to be a saint. And so they're not going to share the foibles at that point. And those foibles are the things that sort of make them relatable. If a character in a movie doesn't have a flaw, it's sort of like how all the girl boss movies suck, right? Like if they don't have a flaw, they're actually completely remote. And I think it's the same reason why most hagiography is terrible, is that we don't ask who was the human being behind this archetypal hero. What were the things that they had to struggle with and go through to sort of reach the victory that we now know them for? And for me, I knew that I didn't fully have that locked in. And I went to live with the friars in Niepokalana, which is the friary that I founded, and then also in Auschwitz, which is the friary that sort of was birthed next to Auschwitz. Both of those places.
After the passing of Maximilian Kolbe.
Exactly.
Wow.
Right. And so as I interviewed the historians who kind of maintain the archives, and then also some of the friars who are very closely kind of connected to they're just like one generation removed from Kolbe, their memory of who he was is very, very fleshy. Like the way that a family member fondly remembers somebody who is very important to the family, but who also is very flawed. And I think I was able to kind of digest that. But it was while I was there that I really felt like God was saying, this is going to happen, and I'm going to move heaven and earth to make this thing come together. And I had no idea what I was sort of about to embark upon, but I got a sense that it was something rather large.
And so when you're hanging out with these friars, they're people that knew Maximilian Kolbe, or they knew the people that knew him?
Yeah,
what was the connection?
Yeah, one generation removed, in that most of the friars who actually knew him have now passed away. And if there are any left, they wouldn't have been people that I could actually like dialogue with and interview. So the person who is in charge of they call him the guardian, the one next to Auschwitz, he knew priests who knew Kolbe, who were sort of contemporaries of him and were mentored by them. And so he sort of had the oral tradition of the community to share with me when I was interviewing him.
So tell me about, you've become an expert, you could argue the expert on Maximilian Kolbe. You've spent years now studying every detail of his life, so you could accurately depict him in your first film. And there were a lot of scenes in the movie that were flashbacks. There was this beautiful woven tapestry between them in the cell and the ongoing events of the camp and their really torture. Again, how you did that, where you made it watchable but real, like that. Because to be honest, I was like, okay, do I want to watch 14 men starve to death in a cell right now? Like,
yeah,
there's
nobody
enough
wants to do that.
evil in the world. But I was like, okay, I've heard great things. I know this is going to be good, so I'm going to give it a shot. And it was beautifully watchable, which again is a feat in and of itself. Like the nuance there, and you lived it in your sleepless deprivation, the torture you experienced. You learned how to live in a way, torture, but to sanctify it, and that you brought that to the filmmaking, which was really remarkable. It's hard to even explain it. You have to watch it. But you're studying the life of Maximilian Kolbe. You're hanging out with the friars that knew people that knew him. Tell me about him, because I read the Wikipedia myself, right? And I think, okay, he was a writer. He was advocating for the Jewish people. He was like kind of an advocate, an activist, you could say. He was obviously a priest, man of God, and he ends up in the camp and he gives his life for this man. And it's all very inspiring, but you're like, right. I could never.
Yeah, right.
Plus he was super talented. Like he was a phenomenal writer and everything else, and media person. Right. Like he was a very big media person, actually.
He was an incredible entrepreneur. And had this mind for engineering. Really, I think that he, anybody that's trying to make a venture into media as a Catholic has to be sort of this combination of a poet and a general. And Maximilian Kolbe was very much that. He had this amazing brain and mind for logistics, for rallying and galvanizing people, but also a vision for how to use art and media to bring forward the gospel. And I think that one of the most important things about his life is that he is Polish, and a lot of people, you kind of have to go to Poland to sort of understand this, but the Polish identity as a political identity is very different from this sort of bifurcated American identity where you have your civic and you have your religious. Their identity as Polish people is very Catholic, and whether or not they actually believe in the church or in the faith or the tenets of the church, that's sort of one thing. But you at least have to sort of give reverence to Mother Mary, and she's your queen. She's the Queen of Poland. That's the mama. That's sort of the identity of Poland, and you can't take one away from the other. And so when Poland is sort of squashed between Russia, where communism is sort of running through it like wildfire, and as he grew up, Poland was actually sort of absorbed inside Russia. It did not have its freedom, and then Germany next to it, where mass media is sort of propagating this sort of terrible, new totalitarianism, authoritarianism, atheistic sort of fascism. Kolbe sees that it's necessary for Poland's identity for there to be sort of a media initiative that combats both of those things with the same medium and same, I guess, the same enthusiasm and excellence that they are able to bring to bear. And so he sort of, as a friar without any funding or any experience, just is like, I'm going to start a newspaper, and ultimately grows that over the course of a few years to becoming one of the biggest media syndicates in Poland. And he even helped to engineer new innovations in printing presses at the time in order to fulfill his ambition. They had a daily syndicate of 1 million Poles, I think, by the time the war happened.
That's
daily.
Wild.
If you think about like the logistics of that. Yeah.
A million
printed things every day.
Newspapers for the Polish people.
Right.
And he was the founder and editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
It's wild.
He had the largest friary in the world at the time. When he sort of accomplishes all of this, he gets bored, as entrepreneurs do, I guess, and decides
so true.
Not to expand to Europe. He's not like, oh, I'm going to go to like start a new syndicate in Russia or Germany. He's like, I'm going to go to the place where in the church, historically, it is absolutely the hardest to evangelize, which is Japan, and starts a new friary with a new sort of mission newspaper in Japan. And that is, I think, one of the craziest stories of all time, that he was able to find somebody to help him translate Polish to Japanese. I just can't even imagine the complexity. Like, where do you even find that person?
Well, it's
like,
crazy.
That's a
There's
needle
like
in a
no
haystack.
AI, no cell phone.
Right.
This is all done pre-internet.
Yeah.
You know, and he's literally traveling to Japan and
Right.
doing this from scratch with
In
very
under
limited
a year.
resources.
In under a year. So obviously he's an incredible leader, but I think that the things that make him human, if you actually kind of peel the curtain back and look at what his life was like and what his brothers sort of said about him and sort of the conflicts there, is that any person who wants to take on a sort of Goliath of the world like this, and this might be something that you can relate with, certainly for me, is that you have to make sacrifices that are almost unimaginable to other people who are sort of doing the 9-to-5 and kind of living their normal lives. And he had to inspire people around him to go to those lengths as well. But knowing how far to push as a leader is actually a really difficult line to walk. And I would say that if you could sort of point out, like, what is the one thing that Kolbe really needed to learn through the course of his life, it actually comes to its climax when he is in Auschwitz, in that he gave everything to this paper, to this media initiative. The sacrifices that he had to make, the sort of galvanizing that he had to do, the things that he had to call out of the people around him. He even, there was this joke that Kolbe loved the printing presses more than he loved the people in his care, because even when he was in Japan, there was this sort of famous episode where he almost kill everybody. Like he was spending all of the money that they would raise on the maintenance of the presses, on the printing, the ink, the paper, the logistics, and the friars were all getting sick. Of course, like the tropical sort of thing is very different than the Polish environment. So just imagine kind of the difficulty of like changing your diet from the Polish diet to the Japanese diet.
Sausage
right?
and potatoes.
Yeah, that's not, like, raw fish, right? So everybody's sick. He's got tuberculosis, so he's bedridden for months.
But he's still like, work
right,
from
yeah,
bed.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so he ultimately actually is sort of like demoted, and somebody else has put, these are sort of like two-dimensional ways of saying the story, but he's demoted because he's pushing too hard and everybody is getting sick, and they need something to sort of moderate that intensity. And when he comes back to Poland, he's not really given the same sort of like leadership that he had before. That eventually comes, but he, I think, is very humbled by this, and the tone and sort of timbre of his letters and his writings and his leadership really begins to change and shift towards this very tender, more personal kind of presence. And ultimately, I think that God was doing something in him that was like, okay, I've birthed this massive media initiative, but now it's all going to be destroyed. God takes all of it away. He watches his beloved Poland basically steamrolled by Germany when they look like they're completely at the zenith of power. There's no way that anybody could do anything about it. The Allies are not in the war yet, so it's just complete catastrophe. He loses his life's work, and ultimately what's called out of him is a single act of love. And he has that sort of famous line, a single act of love can make a soul return to life. And that really became sort of prophetic for what he did in Auschwitz, that it was this one act to descend into hell with these 9 other men, to love them, to lead them in prayer and songs, to sort of nurse their souls back to life, that sort of spread like a wildfire, almost became this like myth that helped to like galvanize and shock Poland's spirit and soul back alive while they were rebelling against kind of the foot and the boot of Germany. So it's an amazing reality that his legacy, I think, has shaped Poland, and the legacy is more from this smaller, more invisible story that perhaps he had no idea was going to have this effect. And I guess the way that we see God's presence and his power exalted in that is in that weakness, I guess, is just kind of this amazing, I think it's an amazing story that I really wanted to set out and try and tell in the film.
So is it oversimplifying to say that he was very hard charging? He had this vision, he had to accomplish it, calling from God.
Right.
Gets really sick, gets kind of humbled, comes back. He's not as big, the big boss as much anymore. Mm-hmm. But then he really learns, okay, I've got to just make every act of love count with the people I'm loving, even as I'm building this thing. Correct me if you think that's
it's a very like simplified version of it. But yeah, essentially that I think is an accurate depiction of his growth as a Christian. Of course, all of the love was there before too, but the priority of values shifts throughout the course of his life to the more like direct love to the person in front of me. And that was what God was really sort of directing him towards through the course of his life.
One thing that's always struck me about the life of any saint is this, especially the martyrs, is that the virtue didn't start at the martyrdom or at the moment of death.
Right.
It started in these tiny little decisions and little virtue building and little prayers and offerings throughout the person's life. You know, sometimes there is a big conversion and then they are on that track, but it's lots of little things.
Right.
And so when Germany invaded Poland, so just kind of looking at the history here, when Poland falls to Germany, it's under Nazi control. What happens at this point to Maximilian Kolbe pre being sent to Auschwitz? He and his other friars, because I know they are resisting ultimately the mistreatment of the Jews, and obviously Catholic priests are being rounded up. Tell me historically what happens. Catch us up there.
Yeah, so he had founded this friary that was actually more like a town at this point called Nepokalanov, and all of the infrastructure of it is built to facilitate the I guess promulgation of the newspaper and the media that he was doing, but he had to let all of the friars go back home.
Where was home?
Home for many, it was all over Poland.
Okay.
So they were sort of dismissed except for like a select few. I think it was about 50 people that remained. And they began to create little sort of ways for people to sort of make money or to take care of themselves or to have food or just like little sort of trades that could be done to sort of reignite at least the economy of the area. And a part of that was accepting refugees, Jewish people, into Nepokalanov to take care of them, to hide them, and to offer them some sort of respite while they were under attack. And so there was many things that could have been happening here as well. Like there's speculation that Kolbe was helping to support the sort of Polish resistance movement as well. But ultimately, there was multiple, I guess, moments of being taken by the Gestapo and put into some sort of camp, then released, And ultimately that led to a final kind of movement of, one of the things that happened was that he's German, actually. He has German blood in him. His dad was German. So he was offered as sort of a loyalty test, German citizenship. And that would have kind of given him a, like, I guess the way Paul was like given citizenship by Rome, and that dignified him in a way that would have been helpful for him to continue his work. And I think that he could have decided at that point, if I take this and I sort of play ball publicly with the Nazis, I can sort of secretly help and keep doing the things that I'm doing. But he, being the stubborn Pole that he was, just, said no. And I think that was like the moment where the Nazis realized, like, this guy is not going to play ball with us. And they were doing a sort of political cleansing. I think a lot of people don't realize that Auschwitz in its first infancy was specifically to destroy the will of the Polish people. So they are bringing in and kind of culling the herd of all of the people who might be leadership that would not be friendly to the Nazis. And Kolbe, of course, is identified as one of these leaders and brought to Auschwitz for not just extermination, but specifically dehumanization, in order for that sort of propaganda arm of the Nazis to like spread that soul-crushing kind of message that Poland is destroyed, there is no identity left, that there is only the Reich.
And you showed that in the film. There were a few heartbreaking moments where there was just like explicit dehumanization done, not so much even for physical torture as much for psychological.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's, it's like the most demonic thing that I think I've gotten to see in such a like direct there's this almost comedic demonic glee in the way that the Nazis were trying to subjugate the people around them. I mean, for instance, one of the things that I learned while I was there is that they, on Christmas, they would put up a Christmas tree and put like the bodies of the dead Poles under the Christmas tree, and they would sing Silent Night. And so there was this just, like kind of demonic inversion of everything that was good and beautiful about Poland that was being done at that time. And so for Kolbe to sing Polish anthems and to step forward out of line, showing, I guess, that Polish solidarity and love for the brother, it wasn't just this sort of individual thing, one man for one man. It was very much a political act as much as it was an act of love, because it was going directly against what the Nazis were trying to do, and ultimately had this effect of like sort of shocking people back awake to their own humanity.
I saw that in the film, how you showed when they would line up the men and mock them, belittle them, and torture them, or, send them off to be tortured. It was to make them look like, and I think there were a few jokes in the movie, like, let's see you dogs, or, like you're not really men anyways. That's why you're, licking water off the ground when you're thirsting to death, or that's why you're, cowering from the blows and like hoping the guy next to you gets picked and not you, because you're like less than human. Right. I mean, is the message. So that scene, and I think we're going to pull it up if it's okay. Can we watch? Yeah. This scene was so, I have to say, actually, before we watch the scene, the movie was really beautiful, and there were very beautiful, positive moments throughout the movie, which you did a really good job of. Even the opening scene was absolutely sublime. You had this like very like lovely, lovers opening scene, frolicking through the fields. You're like, wow, the cinematography here was fantastic. The acting was like perfect. So the whole scene isn't just like torture, moments from Auschwitz. I think that's important. Caveat. I think that's important. Like you did a really beautiful job of that, and even having like a little bit of humor almost, to lighten the load a little bit. But let me pull up this opening scene. So moving up to this point, he's thrown into Auschwitz, and Kolbe is there, and there's other political prisoners, but there's also Jews there too, right? It's a mix.
Yeah.
And tell us about the events that led up to this scene that we're about to watch. So what happens in the camp that the Nazis end up doing this torture ritual?
One of the psychological like games that they played was that if somebody escaped, and not just if they escaped. Sometimes people would go missing because they would die in their sort of work camps. They would be sent out to do various jobs of hard, heavy labor, and you could be cutting down trees or carrying something and fall and die and just not show back up for roll call. So regardless of what that was, if somebody went missing, then the entire prison block was held accountable by being made to stand for something like 24 hours until they had finished their search. And if they had not found him yet, then they would pull 10 men at random to die in a starvation bunker until that person was found, or until they all died of starvation and exposure. And so in this moment where we sort of meet the beginning of the movie, all of the men from Kolbe's prisoner block are standing in line waiting for the commandant to come and pick 10 people to sort of die this terrible, terrifying death.
And how would they typically pick based on your research and the historical
there's
record?
There's no rhyme or reason to it. I think the randomness is actually a part of the torture. But the way that people described it is how we tried to depict it, which was that the commandant has a certain amount of amusement, like a really sick, terrible game of like duck, duck, goose, where he's standing in front of people sort of fainting that he's going to choose them just to see how they react, to play this psychological kind of soul-crushing game with them. And so that's how we kind of played it.
I have to say, before we watch this scene, and that we're going to watch the trailer together too, when you share about your experience of the torture of chronic sleep deprivation for 7-8 years, where you're sleeping 20 minutes to 2 hours a night and you're waking up with panic attacks because of this infection you didn't know you had. Insane. I mean, that's insane. And that probably could kill somebody, if they, I'm going to guess your immune system was so crushed with that. And it just sounds insane.
Yeah.
Anyways, the experience that you had of navigating that and suffering, you could see it. It makes sense now, but I didn't know that. I mean, I knew you had this like crazy story. I knew a little bit about your backstory coming into this interview, but hearing you describe it and having watched the film, I see you threading that needle of torture, but then like navigating, still using your free will to invite God in.
Yeah.
That's really a remarkable feat to do that in a film. I've never seen that done before in a film.
Yeah. I mean, I think that perhaps the closest thing is the Passion. And I really saw in what Mel Gibson did, like a permission to go there, that I think the history of our art as the Catholic tradition, honestly, the Christian tradition in general, goes there, right? Like the crucifix itself is the brand of Catholicism, and that is an image of God's presence in the midst of torture. But I think that we've become a little bit desensitized to that and have forgotten that our faith ultimately has that level of like grit to it. But it is who we are. And what I really wanted to do was to, I guess, depict a modern crucifixion, a modern passion, but with the same level of, I guess, grittiness and realism that the Passion of the Christ did, while also kind of presenting the beauty of what it could be like for God to enter into that and be with us in it, the way that he did through Kolbe, showing us, I think, Christ's face in that moment.
With Mel Gibson, again, these are all oversimplifications, but in the Passion of the Christ, Jesus Christ is God. He's perfect.
Yeah.
So there is tremendous character and humanity there because Jesus Christ is the most beautiful human being because he's God, right?
Yeah.
And the complex and just God is endlessly complex. Anyways, but there's something there's a different challenge than what you had, which is he's a human being that's flawed and finite. Right. He's not God. Maximilian Kolbe is this helpless man, in a sense, with these other helpless men, and he's getting the grace of Jesus in front of you on camera, and how that worked out. So it's a different portrait.
Right. Yes, and in order to do that well, you have to, I think, be willing to accept the fact that that person is flawed and show the flaw. And I think it's something that we actually try to avoid. There's almost like controversy when I was presenting the script to some of the friars for the first time and trying to get them to get on board and help me, like, hey, could you send me some, costumes or some of the, like anything that you could give us to help with the production. And they actually responded at first with this incredible, like, get this away from us, like you're showing Maximilian Kolbe as a flawed person, and that seems like disrespectful, or maybe this is true, but do we have to really tell this side of the story? And I sort of stuck to my guns on it, because I was like, this is actually the way that we see ourselves in this story, the way that we can believe that we also are called to this same level of sanctity and could be that for other people. As heroic and amazing as it is, that is a human being who had his own problems, and that God sort of called beyond those flaws to this heroism. And so, yeah, that I think comes through in the film.
How did you show, what were the flaws that you showed in the film?
Oh, just that he didn't always know how to be with and be present with, that was actually something that he was not good at earlier on in his life. And that this sort of his war for the souls of the men in the cell requires him to become vulnerable to them, to become a human being that talks about food, not just about hope and God and, all these other sort of theological things. And in the beginning of the movie, he's a little bit annoying and totally falls flat as he's trying to kind of evangelize and galvanize the other guys in the cell. And it's ultimately these steps of vulnerability and showing his own humanity that bring them, I guess, alongside him and bring them onto his team.
Yeah, and that was so well done with him when he's first in the bunker and he's like, we can go to heaven, guys, or like, it's going to be okay. And they're all like, we don't believe in God.
Yeah.
Like we're so not where you are at right now.
Right.
And they're just like entering this, almost trance of like the demonic, elements of what they're experiencing, as opposed to inviting in the grace. So, all right, this is the scene where he's being picked for, or the prisoners, are being picked for the bunker, the torture bunker. Was this filmed on site?
This was not in Auschwitz. It was filmed in a barracks-like place that was very close to Auschwitz. You can't shoot in Auschwitz anymore. That's like a big no-no. It's a very sacred space, and film sets are not sacred spaces generally. I think ours was, but you have a lot of things that can go wrong, a lot of noise, a lot of moving equipment. So but we found a place that looks astonishingly like it.
It looked very real.
And shot there. Yeah.
And then how did you find the bunker? So much of the movie was in this bunker.
Yeah, it was a prison cell in Poland that, I could go into the stories behind how we found these things. It was kind of amazing. Like, first we had to find the person that could help us find these locations. And it's sort of a needle in a haystack that you have to line up not just a location that looks authentic, but is available and that is in budget, given that we had basically dollars to give for it. And so, we found a locations person who was willing to go all out with us the way that our team was willing to go all out. And she bought these tomes that were all of the prisons that had been in Poland, all of the historic prisons, and went through page by page by page by page, probably 600 pages of these different prisons, and started finding who was the owners of them. And we found one that was that happened to be in between renovation. So we could go in there and do anything that we needed to it, painting, kind of cleaning it up. It just happened to be available, particularly during the window that we were shooting before it was being renovated. So, yeah.
Was it similar to the bunker that they were actually in?
It was similar in that it was incredibly gritty and moldy and dark and gross, but it was a little bit bigger. When you're making a film, you have to have the ability to move the camera around. Otherwise, it would be like completely atrocious to watch. So that was like a bit of the movie sort of cinema. And similarly, the cell that they were in, not only was it smaller, but it was a lot blacker, and it only had a very small window. And so what we like created with the light coming in was a little bit more like allowed for more beauty to sort of enter into the image. But the experience of it, when you're watching it, it feels claustrophobic. It feels very dark and gritty and gross. And so I think the feeling of it is correct.
All right, here's the scene where we first... Is this the first time we meet Kolbe in the movie?
Yeah.
This is the first encounter with Kolbe. There's going to be lots of backstory that you learn as the film progresses, but this is in Auschwitz, and this is when the selection takes place.
Father! We can find him.
This is a
He's gone.
flashback, right?
They will find him. Stop. Give it back to him.
He needs it more.
So I'm pausing this really quick because this was really beautifully done. And it was the way you did it. Again, I was very impressed because you watch a lot of movies and there's Martin Scorsese and his like amazing cuts and everything. And this had that seamlessness where you were in a scene and then you'd go back to backstory and you'd help the viewer understand these different elements. Here, for people who are listening, maybe not watching this right now, you just went from the scene where they're all lined up and they're being selected for the prison, the torture bunker. But now we're going back and we're seeing them scared that they can't find the prisoner and they're worried about what's coming. But just tell me about who the characters are that we're looking at right now, because they come up later.
Yeah, so the person who just like kind of comes into the scene and says, Father, is Francis Gajnicek, and I'm still so atrocious at pronouncing Polish names, and there's a million consonants in that, so we're just going to go with that. But he is the prisoner that Kolbe steps out of line to save. The other prisoners in this cell, there's one that is sort of sick and who is unable to feed himself. This was something that would often happen where a prisoner would no longer have the power to take care of themselves, and that was sort of the death sentence. They can't even eat anymore. But Kolbe sort of is insisting on taking care of even the ones who are lost causes, and the other prisoners around him, but particularly the one that is sort of eyeing the soup. This is Albert, who is one of the, I guess he's sort of the main character. You could say that he's a protagonist alongside Kolbe in the movie, but we sort of open on him as this youthful, dreaming young lover. And then we sort of cut coldly from that beautiful scene to him dehumanized and destroyed in Auschwitz in this lineup. And we see sort of how far he's fallen here, where he's about to steal the soup from this prisoner who he thinks is a lost cause, ultimately saying, like, there's no reason to try to save anybody at this point. It's all about kind of every man for himself. Like this soup is being wasted on this life. I'm going to take it and give it to my friend. So that's what this scene is sort of showing, is the character kind of conflict between Kolbe and what is happening now, I guess, in the culture of Auschwitz.
And that the movie obviously follows the life of that young man that you open the movie with, who's in that scene with his, bride to be or his wife to be, that beautiful scene. And you see his character remarkably, it's through the torture that he almost finds himself again, which is really incredible.
Yeah.
But okay, let's finish out this scene.
You can't save us.
Halt! I can take his place. Was willst du, polnisches Schwein?
I can take his place. He has children and a wife. I'm a Catholic priest.
Very well, sir. You have proved nothing.
So that moment, first of all, the acting, the Maximilian actor, he's amazing.
Yeah.
Where did you find this guy?
He's a Polish star, actually.
He's amazing.
And he, when I met him, so I was in Poland, and this is just like the body of Christ at work, right? I posted on Facebook and was like, does anybody know anyone in the Polish film industry? And of course, one Facebook friend leads to another Facebook friend who introduces me to a director that is Catholic and is working in Poland. And he heard about what I was doing. He saw sort of a little bit of the short film that we had made as a proof of concept, and really, really became a supporter and almost like a Polish uncle, I guess, for the film. He eventually became an associate producer, and he knew Martian. They had worked together on a small thing, and he introduced me, and he was like, hey, Anthony, I think that this guy might be your Kolbe, and you just need to go and have dinner with him and just ask him about his story. So I, in faith, just sort of drove over to this guy's house, and immediately, as soon as he opened the door, I just had this like very powerful experience of the Holy Spirit. Like, I don't know, like God is here, and I go in and I sit down, and we have this amazing conversation about his experience, Martian's experience, losing everything through his addiction to alcohol. He's an alcoholic that destroyed his family, destroyed his career, and that had to go to AA to rebuild his life. And while he was in AA, he, of course, you have to sort of invite God back into your life as a part of the 12 steps. I'm also a 12-step guy, and I've gone through my own kind of journey with this. So I kind of spoke the language, but ultimately he met Maximilian Kolbe and found him as the patron saint of addicts, who became a part of his return to sobriety. And of course, like the withdrawal process and sort of the torture of allowing God to take everything in your life and kind of rebuild you from the ground up. Kolbe was kind of his partner in that. And so he knew Kolbe as intimately as I did. And I just felt like this amazing sense that God had been preparing both of us, like in converging kind of life stories and our suffering, to be able to come together and partner in the telling of this story. And we couldn't have done it without him. I could not have just hired an actor off the street to tell this story. Like whoever played him had to understand from a very deep, personal, kind of intimate journey of his own what it meant to be inside of a completely hopeless situation, and to be loved through that. And Kolbe and sort of Martian absolutely knew that. It was like meeting someone who we had a mutual best friend, if you've ever experienced that. That was what it felt like. And I didn't even audition him. It was just an immediate sense like, God has ordained this, so let's just say yes and see how this goes, And he showed up and it was just perfect from day one.
He was flawless.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, there was like the act, again, with low budget, first time filmmaker films. Yeah. Usually, you get the acting's a little scrubby, or, there's some flaw like that.
I don't know if I totally believe that.
Yeah, but he was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away by his performance, by everyone. I mean, everybody did a phenomenal job. Mm-hmm. So all the actors did a tremendous job, but and you saw like the Maximilian Kolbe who was like so zealous. Mm-hmm. You saw this zealous Maximilian Kolbe who was just like, God first, I'm going to do everything for God. And then he would kind of get down and have to be, like you said, like really human, even in his own suffering, and then help these men. And you watched that happen in the cell, as you also saw the flashbacks. And yeah, it was amazing. a lot of the film is conversations between the prisoners, as well as their backstories and the way Kolbe basically helped them have breakthroughs and his own breakthroughs in a way in their own suffering. How did you create those backstories? What did you learn about the actual prisoners, the men who died with him? Do we know all of their names? And how did you design all of that?
Yeah, so we don't have records of who died in the cell with Kolbe. The only records that we have are the records of who was in Auschwitz at the time. We know who died that month, actually. And so what I composed as the backstories of these people who were in the cell were basically composites of stories of people who were in Auschwitz at the time, and specifically like the composition, the types of people who were there. I think it was, of course, you have Jews, but you also have people who are part of various opposing parties who are all leaders in their own rights. And I think that kind of understanding when you are somebody who is at Kolbe was a celebrity. Like there's no doubt about that. There's all these pictures and images of the president of Poland and various like dignitaries all coming and visiting him. If you're a politician and you want to gain some sort of political traction, of course, you're going to want to cozy up with the people who have the keys to the media. And so he was sort of thrust into the public square very quickly. And anybody that kind of has experienced or tasted a little bit of that, all of the people who have that type of leadership, the circles become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And they overlap. People know about who, even if they don't know each other, their decisions throughout their life, their allegiances, all of those become a part of their reputation and they affect each other. So you have people in Auschwitz who would have been rivals at the time, who would have been opposing in political parties, but who are now sort of there with this common enemy and this common humanity. And I really wanted to show that. So you have a person from the Communist Party, you have somebody who is a part of the conservative government, you have somebody who is a gypsy, you have a few Jews, just sort of this, you have a POW and his one of his, I guess, soldier friends. This was the composition of the types of people who were in Auschwitz at the time, mainly political prisoners who also who had some sort of threat to pose to the Nazi party.
How did you write or imagine and then write and direct the experience of starving to death?
Yeah, that's a hard thing to explain. We all of the actors and everybody that was on set had to be willing to enter into the hell that Kolbe and these men experienced in some way. We had to become vulnerable to each other to be able to make those performances be what they were, because they're so tremendously painful to reveal. I mean, you can't tell a story like this and do it justice without the performances coming from some real experience of personal suffering. And to do that, like I said, it requires vulnerability. And so we spent a lot of time before we actually went into the cell and began shooting, not just rehearsing, but actually sharing our own personal stories with each other. We slept in these common areas where everybody was on cots, 10 beds per room. We were living on soup at night with the men who were on these starvation diets to like lose weight. We had these we like lived off of chocolate bars and soup, and the crew had more substantial meals. The guys who were acting were on 600 calorie diet a day,
because you wanted them to also get to be.
I didn't tell them to do this.
Okay.
Let's just sort of be clear that I was not asking them to go to that level of extreme, but all of the actors wanted to be there, and they wanted to look. If we're gonna do this story, that the feeling was like, if we're gonna do this, we got to take the gloves off and go all the way. There's no like doing this halfway. So that means we all go on starvation diets. We all have to shave our heads. So we made a sort of ritual out of that, to like shaving each other's heads together. We created this brotherhood that was a real brotherhood, a real community that allowed us to have that level of vulnerability for what was going to happen in these scenes. And the starvation was a part of that. Like we just spent one day, a whole day, just embodying and meditating on what it would be like to starve and to feel that pain, and to embody that together, and going from sort of like we're hungry to all the way to we're dying, just sort of mentally kind of locking that in. And yeah, I think those sorts of practices that were more meditative, these are things that many method actors do and many actors do, but we shared that, and we even like brought some of the cast and brought some of the crew into the experiences of that type of meditation in order to create that sense of sacredness and vulnerability across the entire set.
Was there sort of some scientific literature on what starvation does to the psyche or to the, you know, the brain, to the mind? That
right.
You were
there's plenty of that, and everybody, all of us, like read things as we were preparing for this. You even to the vocal cords, like the dryness of the performance of the voice has to become like cracking and kind of dry. And we one of the hard things about this when you're making a movie is you don't get to shoot in order. Sometimes, you know, if you have all of the Nazi guards and they're all coming into the cell and you don't want to spend a lot of money to have all of them for their day rates the whole time, you have to do all of those scenes on like 2 days, which means if they come in every day, then you have to shoot every day where they are there. And so you have to lock in like, okay, day 1, this is what we feel like. Now we're going to shoot the next scene, which is day 2. And we're going to shoot day 6. Now we're going to shoot day 8. And it's like hour shots of each one. And you have to put them all through hair and makeup as you're sort of progressing all of these things. So each one of those times we're transitioning hair and makeup into the next kind of day or a different moment. We had like a very clear what we feel like on day 9. This is the feeling of that moment. I actually had all of them make sounds, like what does it feel like? Make the sound of what that feels like day 9. And they would all sort of collectively make this sort of groaning, moaning sound so that they could have it in their vocal cords. And then we would like go ahead and perform the scene. So these are sort of things that we were doing to try and experience and embody it as much as possible so that when we went into the scene, it would be very authentic.
Is there a kind, I mean, as the film progresses and you're, you know, watching backstories and all these, you know, other things happen, and then you have the anchoring scenes of the cell, you see the men get slower and slower and slower because they're losing energy. I mean, they're dying, right? But then there's almost this like lightness that comes with it too on a spiritual level because they bond. There's sort of this other forms of healing that starts to happen. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end, they're sort of like in this huddle basically,
right?
On the ground. And so that sort of trajectory, and then all of the men having their individual journeys in that, and then they're doing it collectively. You mentioned you guys did like rituals together to kind of like bond and things like that. But what were some of the most, I guess, unexpected things that might have happened as they're trying to pull that off as actors, or maybe the biggest challenges associated with it too?
I mean, I think that the biggest things that were the most surprising things were just how much we all came to love each other. Like from the very moment that we cast everyone, I put them all in a group chat and we're all bonding around the fact that if you're on a starvation diet, you have to radically change your relationship with not just food, but with everybody else around you. And so you kind of become limited to the other people who are going through that experience with you. So we're all taking pictures of broccoli and like tuna fish and sending it to each other. Like, this is lunch today, or this is my big meal, like sitting down with like the napkin and be like eating out of a tuna fish can. So we start this kind of bonding, and it ends up becoming like we're spending days and days just sort of holding on to each other, right? Like the many of these scenes require them to be, it's so physical. They're holding on to each other, like pulling each other out of like these terrifying panic attacks and things like that. So we're just kind of getting used to being in that level of like complete community, total vulnerability in a way that men usually are not able to, I guess, experience together, at least nowadays. And I think watching what was able to be done when we gave each other that, I guess, freedom to allow God to completely take over and move through us into the most like vulnerable places. It allowed for improvisations that were completely unexpected that became some of the most iconic moments in the movie. Many of these that you see were just sort of, we let the camera play out, like all the scenes where the men are dying and holding on to each other and sort of grieving each other's passing. All of those were done in one single take, one single shot that that lasted for 2 hours. And
Wow.
nobody knew, like when we couldn't say stop, there was no saying cut. It was just like the camera is following this one person and then it moves over to this other person. And but if you were there inside of the cell or kind of watching it on the monitor, it literally felt like being next to a loved one's bedside as they're passing, like all of the ugliness and pain and yet all of the beauty of somebody's life kind of reaching its crescendo and being offered to God. And I think that there's a poetry in the movie of following St. Maximilian Kolbe and the community of these men as they lose their flesh, and they lose all of the, I guess, the burdens that weighed them down in the past. They're coming together in this kind of singularity of peace and love, while at the same time, the Nazis, as they are gaining power and grasping for more and more of that like strength of will, their relationships begin to fray. And specifically, Fritsch, his family life decays and he kind of is driven mad by the loss of his family. And particularly because of this, his same response to suffering is to be selfish, to be isolated, to be powerful, to be invulnerable. And you see him become heavier and heavier and heavier until kind of the final scene. So there's this kind of amazing poetry of like what the strength of the world, if you grasp for that, like what the wages are versus the gift of like suffering with God and what that can allow.
Let's take a look at this singing scene. There were multiple of these, but this one was absolutely beautiful.
Good for nothing.
So the men are starting to fight.
You spend more water than you gain. Please, this could be the last sleep of my life. Can we have peace?
They are at least going to give us water. Aren't they?
Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy.
What is that horrible noise?
Lullaby. My mother sang it to us.
I wish your mother had passed on her singing voice to you too. Hail our life, our sweetness and our hope. What? My grandmother sang it to me too. Don't judge a book by its cover. I sang first chair in Cathedral Boys Choir. Sang like an angel too. To you do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To you do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this well of tears.
Turn then, most gracious advocate, thine eyes of
Then we get the flashback, and this was my moment. So we just saw the Black Madonna come on screen because Maximilian Kolbe has this incredible relationship with the Blessed Mother. And this is one of my biggest professional woes to this day, Anthony, because you guys sent me an email 2 years ago now, I don't know, saying, do you want to come to Poland and be our Black Madonna? And my husband and I were like, what is this? And I said, I would love to do this, but I think I was about to give birth, or I don't know what I was. So anyways, she did a phenomenal job, whoever you got to do it.
Yeah.
But it's very beautiful because that relationship between Mama Mary and Maximilian Kolbe, he did have a really special experience with her that foreshadowed what he would endure later. And so you tease that throughout the movie too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has this, every Pole really has a devotion to Mama Mary, because to be Polish is to also have Our Lady of Czestochowa as sort of this national icon. And what we see here, the scarred Madonna who's been, I guess, bears the wounds of her children, is a part of their devotion. Mm-hmm. So Kolbe himself, even as a child, would go and visit this icon and would have these mystical experiences in front of it. And one of the experiences that he had was a image of Mary offering him 2 crowns, a red crown, which was a crown of martyrdom, and a white crown, a crown of purity. And he famously, as a sort of one of these children that just will not behave and very stubborn, he's like, I want both of them. And that is ultimately, I guess, a prophetic image of where his life ended up kind of going. But I think we wanted to show this devotion as a part of the subconscious of his life that let him have the power to do what he ultimately accomplished.
What is the thing that you think is most surprising for people when they learn it about Maximilian Kolbe?
I think this is something that I've, I guess, shared often, but just his humanity, that even the fact that he can't sing, that he's a bad singer. Like, famously, he was actually both a bad preacher and a bad singer. He was not
really.
He was not somebody that was great on the pulpit.
Even though he was a great writer,
incredibly talented writer, not great at delivering a rousing rhetorical speech. He was very dry and kind of militaristic and sort of intellectual in the way that he approached it. So people and he kind of knew this about himself, and usually gave the platform to other friars that had a little bit better of a gifting for that. But I just love that there's these, as you get to know him, there's just these details about his life that make him so adorably human, and flawed, and also, I guess, amazing as a leader and as a lover of his fellow man. So yeah, I would say that's all kind of a part of it. All this one thread is just how human he is what people are, I think, astonished by if you first meet him through this iconic moment of him just sort of giving his life for his fellow man. You think, how I could never do that. That seems superhuman. But yeah, that's just that's the end of the story, and it took a whole lifetime kind of to develop that.
The film just came out. It was just premiered here in the US yesterday.
That's right.
Premiered in Poland a month ago. I've heard rave reviews, folks at the Daily Wire like Matt Walsh say it's just phenomenal. I mean, I got to see it obviously, and I think it's truly a work of art. How has the reception been?
It's been amazing. I think when people experience it, especially together in a theater, there's something really, I think, profound about the way that as a community, when we sort of come together and meditate on the story, there's this ripple effect of people kind of having encounters with God as they're watching the film, and emoting that, beginning to cry or sniffle or whatever the emotion is, or even laugh, that begins to ripple throughout the audience and allows everybody to sort of get a taste of that experience themselves. And the effect is that at the end of a screening, there's almost always audible sobbing and even laughter in the last scene. When we were in Poland, and the same thing happened when we were at the premiere last night in Dallas with over 1,200 people. The standing ovation lasted the entire credits.
Wow.
Meaning like we have and it's a long credit sequence because like
you give a lot of people
if you can't
credit.
pay people, you have to give them credit.
Funny. That is funny.
And so like people's hands are hurting. It's like they're clapping until their hands bleed. And it's not a clapping for us, I think. I think it's this desire to applaud what we saw Kolbe do, like applauding him. You know, there's like, we go to the title of the movie and then we say, in honor of Maximilian Kolbe, and people they just kind of lose it. Like, yeah, you know, this is somebody that we can be proud of. We can cheer him on with like every enthusiastic bone in our body because what he did was so amazing. And I think, I think it just allows us to fully encounter that with our hearts sort of wide open by the end of the movie. So it's been an amazing thing to watch, and to sort of like afterwards, people come up to me and like share some of the most like profound experiences that I could imagine. You know, a woman came up to me last night who had lost her husband to cancer and who had been just given her own kind of terminal diagnosis a couple of months earlier, and who said, like, this movie is the first time since my husband's passing that I've had hope and that I could like trust God again with my own death.
Wow.
And like, yeah, people who just sort of come up to me in tears and they can't get words out because they don't know how to describe what they've gone through. And we just sort of like cry together, you know, because I know, you know, I've been there where they were. I can tell that like what they're going through, that the movie has evoked something that was similar to my own suffering. And that in the moment kind of in front of me, that like I'm getting to see like the way God came in and helped me to believe in life, to believe in hope, to believe in his own love for me, that power has been like unleashed and has been like given to someone else, like just directly, almost this like from my heart to their heart. The same way that Kolbe's song was sort of like the chain reaction through Auschwitz, that like the gift of healing that I've been given is now kind of through the art becoming a movement in front of me in other people's lives. And there's nothing quite like it. There's nothing quite like it that I could talk about, that I get to see the fruit of all of those invisible moments of me choosing God, you know, choosing life, that no one could cheer me on. Nobody knew how difficult it was to stay alive, to just like do one more day. All of that has been like redeemed and turned into something that's a gift for the world and for other people who perhaps are in that kind of dark night and who need that accompaniment and that hope. So I'm just so grateful and humbled to get to be kind of a part of that work of God.
It's amazing how God used what you went through, Anthony, and made a work of art out of it, truly a masterpiece. And now millions of people will get to see that, and then they will feel the solace and the hope of God's love in their own trials.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an amazing thing that like Kolbe is he's a patron of the pro-life movement, and I originally kind of wanted to go into that work in some way. And I think ultimately, like what I learned through all of this is that all of these sort of end of life, beginning of life, these edge case issues that are like the biggest kind of political hot button topics, they all are a fork from the same thing, which is like, is suffering valuable? Like, is it worth bearing a child into this like painful and lonely world? Is it worth living through debilitating suffering where there's no hope of a like healing? Like, these questions, I think, drive down to the very core of the human spirit of like, who am I in my position to the universe? Who is God? Is there purpose ultimately to the lives that we live, even when we don't have power to sort of shape the world around us to be the way that we think it should be? And I think our answer as Christians is the answer that the world needs. Like, we are in a crisis of hope right now. And we see that crisis happening in all of these sort of political issues, all of the identity issues, the confusion that is rampant in our culture right now. All of that stems from the same core question of who am I and who is God? And is there meaning? Is there any sort of value in me living a life that has and is characterized by suffering? I think that the Polish people in some way have a very beautiful answer to offer that to us, because they've been a culture that has had to suffer deeply for the sake of their faith. And I think that's why, in some ways, that Kolbe and his story is so relevant to us, and why I think this movie is so important for this particular moment right now. Because it's not an answer that says, hey, all of these other things that you're doing are wrong. It's an answer that says, if you choose to carry your cross, if you take on that child, and you have no idea how you're going to do it, how you could possibly do this, like, there is hope for you. There is a unbelievable love and beauty in that choice. And if you open that door to God to let him be with you in that, like, there is like a seismic shock of life and love that can be opened up for the rest of the world through that. Like, if God could bring about redemption and beauty and hope in Auschwitz, in this like darkest part of the world, he can do that in your own life, in anything that you choose, in any cross that comes your way. And certainly has been true of my own life. And the lesson that I've learned is I have kind of turned to God, and allowed him to, like, I guess, to come and to carry my cross with me. So
I hope that people too will be moved, or have I think it will help these people. I don't know exactly how they'll see it, or it'll just be the overflow from this film. But we are such a throwaway culture today. Like, you were talking about unborn babies, and, you know, daily I get Instagram messages from people, and, you know, emails and things like that. And they talk about the friend, or sometimes it's themselves, but they have a diagnosis that's really tough for themselves or their baby. And they're being told terminate.
Right.
And they're, you know, sometimes, thanks be to God, they choose life. Or I just got a message yesterday, and she said they killed their 15-week-old baby boy. He's dead because the doctor said, well, you might get this, you know, health issue to the mother, and she was scared, and so they killed this baby.
Yeah.
And it's devastating. But then when there's that little movement of the heart towards love, like, where there's hope, where there's life, there's a way. And we had Alex Gooding on the show, and she was given all these terminal diagnoses. Baby's going to have a disability. You're going to die. She had an ectopic scar pregnancy at one point. She said no to abortion time and time again. Right. And her little girl came on the show that the doctors insisted that she abort. And you just see, like, this, it's like the incredible color and beauty and glory of saying yes to life.
Yeah.
And yes to love. And and the risks that come with it.
Right. And yes to love is ultimately the choice to be willing to suffer for the sake of another person. And I think that when you choose to, whatever it is, like, to have a child, any decision to have a child, like, not even abortion specifically, like, we're living in sort of a crisis of childlessness right now. I think partly because we don't have a underlying, I guess, worldview that allows for suffering to be meaningful. And everybody, I think, is aware, like, marriage, the commitment to marriage, the commitment to a child, all of these things are commitments to emptying ourselves and giving up our lives for someone else. And I think if the math equation is like, this life is the only life we have, there is no sort of tomorrow beyond this life, there's no transcendent purpose, there is no God, the math equation to suffer, which is necessary for the sake of human survival, doesn't make any sense. Like, that there's no reason. And I think that ultimately, in order for us as a species to, like, survive, to grow, I think that we have to find a higher power. We have to recover that. It's necessary to recover sort of a theory of suffering that is meaningful and that can be redemptive. I think that's what I've learned through the meditation on this story is that that life and the choice to life, the choice to love is itself a way of bringing God's presence to the world right in front of you, being God's face, his hands and his feet, and that there's a richness that it opens up for you in your life that you then have to extend beyond yourself to power that you do not have, and that power is given. I think in our film, you see all of these men end their lives in peace and in love with each other. Like there's this poverty that allows them to unburden themselves and have intimacy, which I think is the core, most beautiful point of life. Like intimacy, love, to be known, to know. And you cannot have that when you are afraid to suffer.
And you had at the end, I know you teased it a little bit earlier, but I hope it's not killing it for everybody. He goes to heaven, guys. St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Dang it, Lila. Dang it. Spoilers.
But you had heaven scenes at the end, and I thought they were really awesome because you don't usually see heaven depicted the way you depicted heaven. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is heaven. Yeah. And only I think a good, Catholic boy who's like been through the ringer and kind of really feels it in his bones what's heaven going to be like could depict it the way you depicted it.
Well, I think it's also just that this is how Jesus talks about it. Right? Like he talks about heaven as a wedding banquet, and, the whole sort of angels with harps and stuff, that's not actually an image that Christ uses or is biblical at all. Right. What we are told by the Bible and by sacred art and sacred imagery and tradition is that it's going to be like a wedding feast,
a big party.
And so, if Kolbe was Polish, his vision of that and what he would have known and sort of mapped onto that sacred image is a Polish wedding. And so we just depicted, as best as we could, what a Polish wedding would look like as the icon of heaven. And it's just delightful. So spoiler alert, that's what you get to see.
That's where they go in the end, guys. I know we're taking a lot of your time and you are on effectively your press tour now. The movie just came out, but I do need to ask, I meant to ask this earlier. I kind of got to it a little bit, but again, the quality, this is your debut as a director, Anthony. And then, I don't know who you had behind all the cameras besides yourself and the casting. You talked about kind of miracles happening with casting. You had a $500,000 budget to shoot a film over in Poland, which is, even the travel costs alone and just getting people fed and housed for as long as it took to film, I'm sure that ate up most of that budget. So how did you pull it off?
Honestly, it was all gifts. Like, I think that the Catholic world is almost like this serendipity generator for people who are doing something that God has really kind of inspired and called them to do. Like, this is a piece of advice that I think I'm really trying to tell people as something that I've learned. I did not have any sense. My faith was so small for what God could actually accomplish. And what I kept finding time and time again was that there was other people out there who had been waiting for the chance to support the making and telling of this story. A wealth of people, a stunt person who worked on all of Tom Cruise's movies that's Polish, that has a devotion to Maximilian Kolbe, that was just waiting for the chance to tell the story. He was the stunt coordinator for all the Auschwitz stuff.
Wait, what were the stunts of like the prison guards?
All the beating. Anything.
Gosh.
So if you think about
the beatings were really well done, guys.
Right.
But no, seriously, it looked real. It looked real without being traumatic to the point where I couldn't, that's the thing. To be honest, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna have to turn this thing off. Right. I didn't turn it off. I did cover my eyes at one point when the guys got shot, but overall it was watchable.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't too brutal, but it was realistic enough to feel like it was honoring the truth.
That's so amazing.
In order to accomplish that, it actually is very, very difficult to do and to do safely. So we needed somebody that was like very talented at working with big sets of lots of extras to create these sorts of environments. And so, yeah, that was one person that we just sort of, in the course of 3 days, we were like, we're way over our skis with this. We need somebody to come and save us. Anybody knows somebody? And turns out like this is what like God had prepared
Tom
to sort
Cruise
of drop
is here
it on. Yeah, exactly.
to save the day.
Yeah.
And how did you learn how to direct?
That honestly came from the work of youth ministry. The creation of a retreat or of a spiritual environment where people are all experiencing the same story and the same theme together and going through a moving meditation through the course of, perhaps if you're meditating on like the story of St. Peter and his calling, you're creating almost like this artistic experience that everybody goes through together, but it's an event. There's logistics, there's volunteers, there's budgets. And so all of that is this almost wax on, wax off for being able to do some pretty impressive and amazing things. And I keep telling people like, what we did was only made possible because all of us that were working on it all came out of the youth ministry circuit, because we realized and learned how to do these things without budgets, without like the normal industry processes for how these things got done. I mean, when we wanted to go to Poland and we needed people to get there, we just threw it up on Facebook. Anybody got miles? We're working on this movie about Maximilian Kolbe. Does anybody want to help us? And so over the course of the last 5 years, as we've made this movie, we've collected this like cohort of people who've given some small thing to help in this kind of crucial moment to help make this movie a reality. And I think because of that, it feels very crowdsourced and crowdfunded. And it feels very much like we've birthed this, we made this. This isn't Hollywood coming to us saying we told your story. It's us going to Hollywood with one of our stories being like, hey, let's do this thing, you know?
What are you doing for distribution?
We're doing a limited theatrical release right now. We're fighting tooth and nail to get screens. But that theatrical release is happening on September 12th. So the best way to look and see if it's coming to your city near you is just to, go to our website, triumphoftheheart.com. You can go to Fandango or to Adam or any of the other places where you can just sort of aggregate all the different show times and see if there's something in your area. And if not, you can call your local theater or their corporate office if you want to go further up and ask them to take our movie and bring it to your city.
That was my next question. How can people support the film?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to tell people about it. Buy a ticket. It's so important to, if you have a showing in your area, to show up on opening weekend, because this is sort of what determines the future of the film.
So this is opening weekend.
Yes, this weekend is opening weekend. We're just hitting theaters September 12th.
This was a calling. Maximilian Kolbe's, St. Kolbe's fingertips are all over this. The fact that you came out with such you were able to create a masterpiece, truly, Anthony, I think is a sign of God working here. This is the Holy Spirit working in this, and St. Kolbe's intercession. This story needed to be told. It's going to be a wild ride with distribution. That's exciting. I'm excited for you guys. You got to go watch this film. If it's not in their local theater, what should they do?
The best thing to do is to put your email in our website, and we will, each kind of window, like opening weekend is the most important, just to sort of break ground. But if we do well, then we get another weekend and it'll go to more screens and all of that.
Yep.
So sharing about it on social, telling people about it. Oh, I can't wait to see this. Calling theaters, being like, hey, bring this to our theater. Really want to have this. They'll reach out to our booker, and if there's enough demand and they're seeing it, they'll bring it for the next weekend. And then if not, it'll come to streaming very quickly after this. So just stay tuned.
Yeah, Anthony, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for making time in this busy week for sitting down with me and getting the sneak peek behind the scenes. It's very fascinating stuff. I'm really excited to see what a change this makes in the world and all the work that you have in front of you.
I'm so grateful. I've been so inspired by your ministry for like a decade now. So to be here and to sort of get to celebrate it and talk about the movie with you is just like a complete honor. And I'm very humbled to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And everybody go watch it this weekend, triumphoftheheart.com. Bring a friend, bring your family, and be changed and inspired. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Lila Rose Show. Go to triumphoftheheart.com today, get your ticket, support this independent film, and help spread the incredible story of St Maximilian Kolbe. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you to all of you who have been subscribing. The channel continues to grow because of all of you. A huge thank you to our partner, EWTN, the largest religious broadcaster in the entire world. EWTN is reaching millions of people every single day with the beautiful truth of the gospel. You can watch new episodes of The Lila Rose Show 24 hours before they hit podcast app over at EWTN.com/on-demand.